Welcome to OLC 40, Week 6. This is Class 21, Unit 3, and I am Jillian Percy. These are all the ways you can reach me, 1-800-465-7144. You can reach me at the WASA office, 1-800-667-3703. Your work can be faxed at 1-800-463-7852. You can email me any questions at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. And you can rewatch your recording at any time at G Percy WASA. Okay, so we are going to continue our work on prepositions. There's actually quite a lot of stuff on prepositions. Some are prepositions of location. In these kind of sentences that use prepositions, it's usually followed by the article the and a noun. And there's an assumption that both the speaker and the listener know what the object is that's being referred to. So, for example, the keys are on the table. The bread is behind the milk. The rake is against the shed. The garden hose is around the back of the house.
So I'll be entering my second year of university as a business student. So for me, balancing YouTube with school makes time management and
ESL Library. What are prepositions? Prepositions are words that show things like time, place, and direction. Let's learn about prepositions of place. Prepositions of place show where something is. For example, the dog is on the couch. The coffee table is in front of the couch. The lamp is next to the couch. What are some common prepositions of place? Listen and repeat. Above. Between. In front of. Next to. Under. Behind. On. In. Across from. There are two common sentence patterns for prepositions of place. The first pattern is the, noun, verb, preposition, the, noun. For example, the flowers are in the vase. The second pattern is there, verb, a, noun, preposition, the, noun. For example, there is a cat under the bed. The dog is behind the lamp. The shoes are under the coffee table. There is a cat on the bed. There is a dog between the couch and the chair. Look at the picture and say or write a sentence using a preposition of place. For example,
So the
The
painting
painting
is
is
above
above
the couch.
the couch.
Okay, good.
Now you try.
So here is an example of a little picture and then some words that we can fill in the right prepositions. My favorite room in the house is the kitchen. The oven is something 2 cabinets. So there's the oven. There's the 2 cabinets. It's below, right? Where do I have below? Something in the left cabinet, there is a blender. So above, maybe? Possibly on. I'm going to go with above right now. Something in the blender, there is an opening cabinet. Okay, so I'm going to switch that because above the blender, there's an open cabinet, whereas the blender is actually kind of sitting right on the cabinet. Do you see the difference? This one's on, that's over. I mean, or above, really. Something in this cabinet, there is a microwave in this cabinet. There's a microwave. On the right side of the cabinet with the microwave, there are 3 other cabinets, the second of which has jars inside. I know the number is confusing. Something, the last cabinet, there is another cabinet with the sink, something, it. So I'm going to say the sink inside of it. I know I'm doing it backwards, but that's kind of where it grabs me first. In front of, next to the last cabinet, there is another cabinet. Next to, in front of, near. Near? Beside the last cabinet. It's a little bit confusing. I guess they're saying this is a cabinet and this is a different cabinet. I guess, I don't know. Something, the last cabinet, there is the fridge, and the blank, the fridge, there is a window. So I would say near. Next to it almost would also work. Near the fridge is a window. Beside, do we have beside? Beside the last cabinet, there is the fridge. Well, I'm gonna, oh, we used it over there. So I would go again there. Blank the window, there is a table. In front of the window, there is a table. There are 2 chairs behind the table. And another 2 on each side of the table. From the window, I can see the trees that are outside. Okay, so you can see there was a few that I had to kind of think of because the difference, like between on and above, is just kind of little tiny things, right? In or inside is a little tiny difference, and in some cases it's not really a big difference. It doesn't really matter that much. It's just, it's not uncommon for there to be a little bit of a question about those kind of things. Okay, prepositions of measurement. Before we go on to this one, I want us to remind you, you can measure anything. You can measure time, money, weight, mass, temperature. So it all kind of depends. You can be really exact, like if I want to say run to the 1 mile mark, or you could be estimating or being approximate, like we need about 5 pounds of potatoes. The most common prepositions of measurement are at, by, for, to, and of. So I want a pound of butter. You were the winner by a few seconds. Get 2 burgers for $10. Newborns often weigh between 6 to 10 pounds. I want to buy a meter of green cotton. All right, prepositions of agency. An agent is just like who's doing it or what's doing it. They're really often used with passive voice. The house was built by a famous architect. He dug the hole with a backhoe. And prepositions of origin are from and of. Of is like when something was where it was, what it was built out of or manufactured from. So the pot is made of copper. What country you were born in or city. He is from Norway. So that's an example of those two. Instrument prepositions indicate what tool or what instrument did the job. So he hit the nail with the hammer. He wrote his novel on the computer. So they don't mean like he was sitting on the computer. They mean, he did the work on the computer. And this is where, I don't know if we mentioned last time, sometimes prepositions are a bit idiomatic. Like if you look at their literal meaning, they don't make sense. But we've developed some where everybody kind of knows what it means. So that's kind of one of the tricky things about prepositions. The car runs on electricity. She traveled via the subway. The wood is held together by screws. The sound waves are carried through the wires. He finished the painting with a palette knife. So going to the sound waves are carried through the wires. Like one way when you talk about through is like you're barging right into the middle of something. Obviously, they don't mean here that the sound waves are like cutting a hole into the middle of a long wire. They mean it's traveling along the wire, right? And you could say along. It just, I think through the wires is maybe more common. So again, it's one of those idiomatic things. Okay, so these are sentences that have prepositions of agency, origin, instrument, or measurement. So the book was written blank Nora Roberts, for, by, or because of. Well, I think everyone probably knows this one. By, we always know books are written by somebody. He fixed the door with duct tape, by duct tape, or for duct tape. I think with is really common for instruments. He is originally to the Ukraine, from the Ukraine, or like the Ukraine. All right, so it's obviously an origin one, so it means it's from. All the animation was completed to computer, by computer, or as computer. So to. Sorry, not to, by. The solo on the song was done from flute to flute or with flute. With, and you could have with a flute too. The cars were shipped by Germany, from Germany, or for Germany. Generally, I would say from. By wouldn't make sense mainly because like the country of Germany isn't shipping the cars. It'd be a manufacturer, right? The temperature dipped blank 0 degrees from 0 degrees to 0 degrees with, I'm going to say to there, although dipped might, from might make sense too. Please get 2 pounds with steak, of steak, or for steak. This is definitely of. My doctor's appointment was from 2:30 at 2:30 or with 2:30, definitely at. Okay. Prepositions of cause, purpose, and reason are used to indicate why, what for, or because of what something happens. We usually use these prepositions when we answer the question beginning with why. So for example, why don't you eat breakfast? I don't eat breakfast to sleep more in the mornings. So to is kind of indicating the part after that is your reason. There are several commonly used prepositions of cause, purpose, and reason. So due to is used to express the cause of an action. Due to her strict parents, Liz rarely went out. It was difficult for her to make friends. To is used to express the purpose of the action. Usually it's followed by a verb. People go to clubs to dance and to meet new people. For is also used. It's usually followed by a noun, pronoun, or a gerund. A gerund is just a verb that's acting as a noun in that sentence. So, for example, swimming is my favorite thing to do. Swimming is normally a verb, but in this case, we're using it as a noun to describe the activity. For this sentence, he was taken to the police station for driving under influence. Driving under influence is a whole charge, so it's kind of a whole noun phrase there. Because of is also used to express the reason of something happening. I need to go home earlier because of my sick cat. You have to have the of there. You can't just say because my sick cat. It's not grammatically correct in English because it's a coordinating conjunction and you use it generally to connect two main clauses together. I was actually told when I was little that this wasn't considered okay. So I'm kind of surprised to see it here. So I don't know if that's changed or if it's just an ungrammatical site. But I think people do use that. So I wanted to point out because of can be used, because by itself just wouldn't be used there. I need to go home earlier because my sick cat is going to the doctor's would work, but not just because of my sick cat, because my sick cat. Okay, let's give it a try. Why haven't you been walking with me for the last few weeks? My bones ache because the cold, for the cold, or due to the cold. Okay, for this one, definitely due to. Why did he get fired? He got fired from embezzlement. That makes it sound like embezzlement did it. For embezzlement or since embezzlement. Well, embezzlement isn't an action, so it can be since embezzlement. For embezzlement. Why did she get divorced? She got divorced with his affair, by his affair, or because of his affair. Because of. Why did your mom bake a cake? She wanted to surprise me, for surprise me, or because of surprise me. She wanted to. That was her reason. All right. Today we're talking about resumes. And 50 marks total for doing the resume. As mentioned briefly in lesson 14, applying for work, a resume is normally sent with a letter of application or a cover letter to employers in response to more permanent types of jobs that generally pay higher salaries and for which more qualifications are required. That isn't the only time you can do it, though. I had resumes as a teenager. It's totally fine. As a much more formal channel of communication as compared to a completed application form, it is a very important aspect of an effective job search. I also found having a resume was helpful to fill out the application. I don't necessarily remember the exact years and months that I worked a job. Even if somebody wanted me to fill out an application, I would still bring the resume. You could attach it, you could use it to fill out the application. It's still a really useful thing. Sometimes it's called a curriculum vitae. I do not find it called that other than in education. It is a summary of information about you, your name, address, and telephone number, email address, an objective, your level of education, your work experience, if you have any skills you may have, your interests, at least 2 references. I would say these days it's more like 3. A resume is an official looking document displaying not only details about one's academic and workplace experiences, but it is also a demonstration of organizational skills. There are 3 types of resumes that can be used by a job applicant depending on their experience and the audience. So there's the chronological, functional, combination. That's weird. I would say functional and skills are the same type, and a combination is meant to be a type of the chronological and the functional. I didn't write this part. I'm just reading what's actually there. Sorry. The chronological resume summarizes what you've accomplished, starting with the most recent events and going backwards in time. It emphasizes education, work experience, and dates. The functional or combination resume emphasizes your most important work experience to the reader and responsibilities or functions regardless of dates. The skills resume emphasizes the skills you've acquired through work experience, which is really what the functional resume is supposed to be doing too. Producing a resume on paper is still the most common way to go. I disagree. However, there's another option available for your consideration. You could submit a copy of your resume to any number of websites, and employers can read your resume online at their convenience. The most common one for that would be putting your resume on LinkedIn. It absolutely gets used by people who are in human resources. The other option, though, and it probably wasn't common when this was first written, is a lot of times you'll submit your resume electronically along with an electronic or digital version of your cover letter. So something to think about. In this case, they're not giving you a choice. They want you to do a chronological resume. It is kind of still the most well-liked. There are reasons to use functional resumes or combination resumes, but in this case, they're kind of taking the choice away. That's what you have to use. You can also revise a resume that you've already got at home. Okay, so if you've already got one, that's fine. So here is a very brief example of the resume. I would say it looks really empty. It needs to be added to, but this is theirs. The name and address is up top, telephone number and email. Objective is the first thing, then your education. It doesn't have to be there, by the way. You could definitely put it down below. Your work experience, skills, interests, and then references. It'd be really uncommon to put your references right on your resume just because it takes up room. It's more common to have another paper and have the resume on that. And like I said, education could go below work experience. It kind of depends. If you're still in school and you haven't worked much, like if you're kind of young, then you may want to put education above work experience. If you've already been out in the workforce doing some jobs for the last, 5, 10, 15 years, then you may want to put your work experience first so that it's the first thing they see. Okay. This is a very bare bones resume. To me, the page looks really empty. I would probably want to write a little bit more about previous job duties and skills, and I probably would also format it a little bit differently. The less work experience you have, the more you want to make it clear what kind of skills you have. So you can see here, youth counselor, all they said was they directed recreational activities. Well, I really doubt that's all they did, because being a youth counselor usually involves a lot of different skills. So here I've just listed some of the skills you could list. You probably wouldn't want to list all of these. You might pick the 4 ones that you think you did the most of, or that you were best of, or that relate to the job you're applying for most. But you wouldn't want to have just one thing. You'd want to list 2 or 3 things. And I would do it as a list. I wouldn't do it kind of here. They put it in a series, like it's a paragraph. I wouldn't do that. Supervise children from ages 8 to 12, promoted teamwork and good sportsmanship, planned physical education activities to develop gross motor skills and strategizing skills, designed fine arts activities to develop fine motor skills and creativity, inspected cabins to ensure good hygiene standards were maintained, followed all safety guidelines. A lot of these, you can see, they start with verbs. They're trying to emphasize what you know how to do. So you don't want to use the same verb over and over again. You want to try and make the verbs different. So when I first wrote this, I had planned physical education and I'd used planned fine arts activities. I deliberately changed it to a different verb to make it look different, which, I mean, it is kind of designing an arts activity is different than planning a physical education thing, but I'm emphasizing what some different verbs. You don't want to get crazy, but most of us have done more than one thing at a job. Let's see. Okay, so the assignment is creating your own resume. This is assignment 37. It's worth 30 marks. Your task with this assignment will be to develop a chronological resume of your own using the template provided on the next 2 pages and provided on the information and based on the information provided above alongside with the sample. Note, if you already got a resume done, perhaps from an earlier course, take a close look at it and revise it as necessary, especially if you've not used it for a while and have something new you can now add to it. For example, some new work experience, or maybe you've got some new trainings. The template on the next page, when completed, will be a rough copy only. You are to revise and edit this rough copy as needed, and you are to produce a final copy on a computer. Remember, your resume is used to show an employer that you are the best person for the job, so it has to be as professional looking as possible and include all your qualifications and positive characteristics. You want to make the greatest impression possible. The rough copy is going to be worth 15. The final copy will be worth 15 as well. Okay. So these are the assignment criteria. And I'm mentioning this because it comes up again when I talk to you about the rubric, and this is what I'm talking about. These things that it mentions have to be on your resume, even if you don't necessarily think they're great. If you don't like them, you can always take them off after you hand it in if you're planning to use this resume to actually look for work. So for the resume you hand in to me, rough and good, both of them have to have this. Your name and address can be either centered at the top of the page, or you can put it on the left-hand side. You would never put it on the right-hand side because we read from left to right. Your objective is supposed to be something specific that you were hoping for in terms of work. They're being a bit vague there. I'll talk more about how to write an objective shortly. Number 3, when you are listing information in the education and work experience, make sure that you start with the most recent first and you go backwards in time. And the reason for this is whatever you're doing now is in likelihood most connected to what job you're trying to go to. Not necessarily, but most likely. And if you've been working for a really long time and done a lot of jobs, I know technically they say you might want to list every job, but sometimes you don't. Like if the last 4 jobs have been involved working with children, and then before that you were doing cash, you may not want to mention that job because chronologically you don't need it, right? So you want to at least list what you've done for the last 5 to 10 years. But if you've been in the workforce for a while, you don't necessarily have to list every single job you ever did from the time you were 14, right? List all the skills that you have, leadership, organization, also more specific skills. Like if you know how to do Excel spreadsheets, point that out. If you know how to do slideshows with PowerPoint, mention that. List any 3 interests. Okay, this used to be really common. It's not common anymore. You're going to have to do it because the assignment says to. But I want to point out that's one of those things that if you were actually doing a resume to use for work, I would take that off. The only time you would use interests these days is if it connected to your job objective. Okay. I think I talk about that a little bit later. I'll come back to that if I don't. List 3 references if you can, otherwise 2. A reference will be a person who knows you fairly well and will say some good things about you. Okay. So don't include the boss from 2 jobs ago that didn't like you and is going to badmouth you because that'll kill your chances of getting a job. Some examples of references would be high school teachers, former employees or supervisors. You include their name. You can include their job title if it's important, their address, a telephone number. If you did volunteer work with somebody, you could mention them. You should not use any family members or relatives if possible. I know that isn't always possible. In this case, I would say don't use like a close family member. Like don't use your mom or your dad. But if your uncle was your boss at your last job, that's okay to mention because he was your boss, right? So don't mention somebody who was only family. But if you had a family member that was a supervisor or a boss at a job you worked, that's totally fine to mention, okay? As an option for references, you can simply put the words available on request. That is what's typical. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so here is like the rough layout. You can just handwrite on this, okay? I would maybe do a photocopy first before I did that so I had a spare one in case I messed up. But anyway, so you need your objective, your education, your work experience, your skills, your interests, and your references. They want it in this order, so go ahead and do it in that order. A resume is a very descriptive type of document, okay? So think about the words you're using because words are so important in description. It will carefully describe your work experience as well as your skills and interests. You need to know how to choose your verbs very carefully to reflect all the things you know how to do at a job. We talked about that, and we'll talk about that more in a second. Also, if you have never held a job, which is quite possible if you're still in high school, but have done volunteer work, then you can list that with the heading. I would modify the heading in your good copy to say like volunteer and work experience or work and volunteer experience. Also, keep in mind that babysitting for money, doing odd jobs for money like dump runs, shoveling snow, grass cutting, fixing the teacher's quad, those can all be listed as well. You could just put a little section called odd jobs and list the general dates when you did odd jobs. They're not technically like a work thing, but they show what skills you have and they also show that you're hardworking. Okay. I talked about the interest things already. Oh, so for example, if you were applying at home hardware, but you didn't have any experience working in a hardware store, but you do woodworking as a hobby in your spare time, by all means, mention the interests. If you're applying at a sports store and you're like a huge outdoor buff and are always involved in skating and skiing and snowshoeing, then of course mention it, right? So that is where interests can be useful. Again, especially if you're a high school student who doesn't have much work experience, list what is connected. So if I was applying at home hardware and I have a huge interest in Dungeons and Dragons, probably not going to mention that because it's not really useful in terms of getting me the job. Okay, I found this really useful list of common job verbs. Okay. And you can see, first of all, they're almost always written, actually, they're always written in past tense because it's stuff you already know how to do. Okay. It's also really common to have it be the first word in the sentence. It doesn't have to be, but it often is. And the nice thing for this one is they've kind of looped them into categories. So there's a bunch of verbs that talk about how you communicate, a bunch of verbs that talk about how you manage something, verbs that talk about how you teach people or help people, verbs that talk about financial skills, clerical skills, verbs that talk about your technical skills, creative skills, research, and look, a nice little spot here to figure out which ones you want. So if I was doing this, I would think about what have I done, but also what am I aiming for, right? Like maybe I didn't do a lot of filing, but if I was going to be applying for jobs where I was an administrative assistant, if I did any kind of filing, I would be sure to mention that, right? If I was looking for a job, maybe as a camp counselor, okay, well, that's going to be the same things here in the teaching and helping things. I might mention that, you know, I taught an art class for Girl Guides or Boy Scouts or whatever, because it relates to the job. So think about what you've done, but also think about what kind of skills do you want to highlight for the next job. So here's an example. Sometimes people will want to write something just like, I worked as a cashier. Absolutely, you did. But what are some specific job duties or things like actions that you did while you were a cashier? Sometimes you can add an adverb that describes how you performed an action as well. You don't want to overdo that one, but it can be helpful if you want to differentiate yourself. So for example, consistently closed cash tills with an accuracy of plus or minus $10. That means something to somebody who's looking for an accurate cashier. Handled credit debit points of sales transactions. Resolved customer complaints and returns with patience. Awesome. Trained new cashiers on our register and software systems. You maybe only trained somebody once, but that's fine. That counts as a job duty. Okay, here's an example. Okay, going on to how to formulate an objective. An objective is usually just stating what kind of job you're looking for. It also sometimes kind of wraps up education and skills in a very short sentence. It's usually just like one simple sentence. I think objectives are often covered in your cover letter, but you know what? Sometimes resumes can get separated from the cover letter, especially if you're applying to a bigger company where they might have a gigantic human resource office. So here are some sample objectives. Reliable and friendly individual looking for work as a receptionist or assistant where I can use my organizational and clerical skills to contribute to the company. Sorry. Experienced and patient childcare worker looking for employment in a preschool environment. Friendly and enthusiastic telemarketer who excels at making cold calls looking for work in sales. Recent social work graduate with experience working with children in a variety of settings looking for work in the educational field. So you want to emphasize what you've done. Sometimes you're wanting to emphasize the work. So recent social work graduate, they probably haven't worked in social work yet. Okay. But if you're looking for the educational field, then any experience working with children, even if you haven't worked as done your social work stuff, is going to be connected. Okay. So these are some examples of objectives. Now, I just want to mention one thing. If you are planning to use your resume afterwards to actually do job hunting, not all resumes use objectives anymore. I find they're not as common in modern resumes. Sometimes they do something called a career summary section instead. If you're using this assignment to create a resume that's going to be used for job hunting, check out this one article called Ditch Resume Objective and What to Do Instead. I just don't use the summary or the objective, to be honest. Most times I feel like that kind of stuff is covered by my cover letter. Totally up to you when you're doing it on your own. For the assignment, you have to do the objective, okay? All right, let me see here. Oh, so here is a sample handwritten rough copy. Obviously, this isn't my real handwriting. I'm trying to show you how it should look, okay? I also included volunteer experience. Again, if you are still in high school, this is really important. You're still young, you may not have a lot of work experience. It's perfectly acceptable to show some volunteer experience that shows off interesting skills. Especially if you're going to include whoever your supervisor was when you were a volunteer, you want to make it clear that it was a volunteer because sometimes the standards are different. And if you didn't mention it on your resume, but your reference mentions it, it's going to look strange. If you've done something extremely interesting that relates to the job you are applying for in a co-op course, I would also mention that either in the cover letter or your resume. So for example, if you did a co-op working in an office as an administrative assistant intern and you're applying for a job as an administrative assistant, then that would be relevant to mention, right? Especially if you're doing it like summer work, right? Definitely want to mention it. So here is my example. Up top is my address. I always like it in the center, but some people like it over here, lined up with the left-hand margin. Objective, enthusiasm. This obviously is not real. This is just me kind of inventing one, by the way. Enthusiastic and energetic high school student looking for job in retail environment. All hours and shifts are welcome. Education and training, September 2021, current time, Sioux North High School, Sioux Lookout. You generally wouldn't go before high school. If you have any other special training, here's where you'd mention it. First aid training, lifeguard training, driver's license, heavy equipment training. If you've got any kind of like computer certificates, anything that you've done that is like an official that you can show them, hey, officially I've got this, that's training. This is a great place to put it. Work and volunteer experience. For the first one, I've got Northern Store Cat Lake, March 2023 to the present. I didn't include a whole lot because I'm running out of room. Trained in point of sale transactions with debit credit card machines, counted out end of day till with accuracy. Now, I also included a volunteer sample to kind of show you what I mean. Vacation Bible School Cat Lake, volunteer camp counselor, July 1999 to August 1999, supervised children aged 5 to 10 in afternoons during all recreational activities. Ensured safety standard and rules were followed, designed games and taught children how to play them. Again, I'm only using 2 or 3. it is volunteer experience, and it might not be related specifically to try to find a retail job, but it does show that I was reliable. It also gives me a way to tie in my reference. Whoever was supervising me while I was doing that, I can use them as a reference now, and they understand why I've used them. Skills, word processing skills, Ojibwe, organizing events. Again, this is all imaginary. But mentioning another language is useful here. All sorts of jobs want people to have more than one language. So, in fact, I've known some businesses or like even like banks in my hometown that'll mention, hey, we have tellers who can speak French, Italian, German, so that people know, hey, I can bring my mom who, mostly speaks German into this bank and they'll be able to get service. So having an extra language is a great place thing to put during skills. Interests, visual arts, interior design, outdoor photography. Here I was thinking, what if you're a retailer, but you're hoping to move into some merchandising? So I'm kind of mentioning things that might be good for me merchandising. References, you could say available on request, or you could also say enclosed on next page. That's a really common way to do it too. Okay, so that is your rough copy. You want to make sure that you've done this as well as you can. It should look like a resume. It shouldn't just be a few notes, right? I need to be able to mark this as if it was your actual copy. Then you are going to go through in your good copy and revise things. Like maybe I only wrote down one thing. Maybe I'm going to add something. Maybe I use the same verb for both of these. I'm going to change it and try and use different verbs. Things like that. I'm just going to go through and kind of tweak everything so it sounds really strong. Okay. So now it is totally fine for your good copy to be formatted the exact same way that your rough copy is. In other words, it's totally fine to use this exact same format and just type it all up on your computer, whatever you use. Okay. However, it does have to show that revisions and editing have been done. It cannot be exactly the same. If you're doing this assignment with the idea of using your resume for actual job hunting, I did want to show you some alternate formats just in case you want to try some of them. You don't have to. No matter what, the one that you hand in to me has to include those same categories that are listed on the rough copy because that is part of the assignment requirements. So you have to have your name up top. You have to have the objective, education and training, work experience, skills, interest, references. All those categories are required for the assignment, whether you like them or not. Set it. Okay, so here's an example. This is an alternate resume setup from Canva. This is the URL for Canva if you want to go check it out. I think I've got a little video clip. The nice thing with this is it's kind of really beautifully set up. So if you're planning to use your resume to look for work, especially if you're someone who's got a lot of work experience, this is a beautiful little resume, very simple, and be a great way to do it. Down here is a nice little language section that shows how well you speak different languages. That could be useful. You also don't have to. Languages could easily get rolled into skills, in which case I wouldn't do the bars. I know some people do the bars lately. I don't really care for it myself, but you could definitely roll it into here. Let me just see if I can pull up, see if this will work. Okay, so I just want to walk you guys through how to use Canva to create a resume. I think it's a really useful site. You go over here to create a design, click on that, and you can see resume is one of the options. I'm going to click on that as well. Okay, so now you can see what has come up is some different templates. Don't worry about the US letter templates thing. Canada uses the same type of letter system, so that's fine. I'm going to hit resume, and you can see some things come up. Now, if you see this little king sign, it means that it's a paid option. It's not a free option. So obviously then you wouldn't want that. But I'm just gonna kind of grab a few things just to kind of show you. So it says apply both pages. Yeah. So here's a very simple kind of chronological resume. Oh, here they've included kind of the cover letter. So this is one way to do your education. Here's the experience, the date's kind of right there. It's always that reverse chronological order, right? You put the newest one up top, and then you keep going down, shows what you've done. If you want to change these, obviously you would just go in and change them. To make it a little bit bigger, so I can see what I'm doing, that's fine. I'm going to do something big here because I can change it if I want to. Say I want to change a different font. That looks okay. Okay, so change the font, no problem. I could change the size, but if I change the size, it is going to throw things off a little bit. Sometimes changing the font can too as well. This is kind of a newer thing where they kind of give you these little bars that are supposed to show how much skills you have. I personally think they're goofy and would just erase it, put the notes there, but you're welcome to use it if you want to. I'll give you an example. That's kind of neat too. I like this because you've got the work experience on the one side, and then you've got education on the other, skills over here, and then any kind of certifications you have. Sort of where you put things like first aid certification, lifeguard certification, driver's license, all those kinds of things. Okay? And any of this can be changed, right? But it's just a nice little way to get things set up. Summary, you could put objective here instead. Like my objective is to obtain exciting job in sales or whatever you want to put there. So, is there anything else? Things like that even can be taken off or changed. If I want to take it off, just put it in the garbage. If I wanted to change it, I could make it like a little bit, make it different. Oh, I don't want that, but I do. I could make it heavier, like stronger. I could change the color and make it like black. So anything on here is customizable. You do not in any way have to use the site. You can make a very plain one. I just found it was kind of a nice simple way to start or get yourself started on a resume if you want to use that. So this is Canva. Okay, so that was just a nice little way to show you guys what is available out there. Again, you absolutely do not have to use it. You are fine to just do it on whatever program you normally do your work on. But I did want to make sure that you had seen it because I know some of you might be older and might really be looking for work and want to have a really strong way to do it. You can do all these things for free. You don't have to pay for it. You do have to set up an account. And again, if you wanted some of the ones that have the little king sign, then those you'd have to pay for. But I've used it a lot and I've never paid for an account because I just find it really helpful. Hang on. Here's another. Oh, yep. This is the example I wanted to show you. I like this one a lot. Nice and simple, nice and clean. This one, they haven't labeled this, but this is essentially their objective. They've put their contact info and kind of turned it into like a little header. That's kind of cute. Experience, education, skills down here. You might even split this kind of spot up and have like skills over here and interests over here. This is a nice one too. I think it's really simple. You don't have to use the color, by the way. When you photocopy, the color won't really show up. So you want to be careful you didn't use like yellow, that won't show up. But a lot of times these days, people are submitting resumes online digitally, and then a little tiny bit of color is not bad. You don't want to go crazy though, because that just kind of puts people off. Google Docs. You can do your resume in whatever word processing program you're comfortable with. I don't know much about Macs, but I'm sure they have a word processing program. If you're comfortable with that, that's great. Microsoft Word is fine. Google Docs is fine. You have access to Google Docs as a WASA student, and it does contain some resume samples as well. You're welcome to use that. Now, the only thing I found was it didn't necessarily line up to our our categories. I did find a way around that, but I'm running out of time. I can see here. So I'm going to put a little star here so I remember to start here next time we talk. If you're wanting to use Google Docs, I will walk through it. You also obviously can just go in there and kind of fool around a little bit. It's not too hard to learn, I don't find. So you're welcome to do that as well. I will talk more about this. Today's Thursday. I'll talk more about this on Monday. If you want to get started, go ahead and I will tackle this again. Thank you so much for showing up. I will be in the office all day tomorrow if anybody wants to call and ask me about an assignment. And I hope you have good luck with getting your assignments done. We're certainly getting near the end of Unit 3. Have a good weekend.